the thesis statement. I'm going to give us a lesson on managing the thesis statement in the papers that require a thesis statement. You will know whether or not these papers require a thesis statement because the assignment sheets will make it clear. The assignment sheets will specify, for instance, that you have to close your opening paragraph of your paper with a thesis statement. Moreover, those same assignment sheets that tell you where to put a thesis and tell you that you have to have a thesis are also going to provide you a few lessons on how to make sure that your thesis statement is a successful thesis statement. There's a difference between a thesis statement and a good thesis statement. We're here to cover a good thesis statement, of course. You may have seen the acronym HOC in our course to this point. HOC is an acronym that stands for Higher Order Concerns. Higher Order Concerns in writing is a lesson, is a reminder that some things matter a little bit more. These are the considerations that you must prioritize. At the very top of your higher order concerns in writing is what's called your message. No one wants to read a message that they feel like they've already heard many times before. Nobody wants to read a message that they feel like doesn't challenge them, doesn't advance their knowledge on a topic. More than anything, a college paper is this opportunity to advance our audience's knowledge on a topic. You can think of them as thought experiments. Every paper in college is a form of a thought experiment, especially those that call for a thesis statement. So, what do you need to know for managing the thesis statement? You have a chapter assigned this semester, chapter 3, constructing the thesis and argument from the ground up, from writing in college, from competence to excellence. It's one of my favorite chapters, and that's one of the reasons why I assign it. It's a reminder, a visual for thinking through what a successful thesis statement needs to do. A successful thesis statement doesn't just point out the facts. It isn't just an argument. And it has this sense of meaning. It's kind of like building a successful house or building, you're putting together this structure that you're proud of. When you're putting together a structure you're proud of course, there are going to be certain floors, there are going to be certain building blocks. A thesis statement is no different. A thesis statement needs these essential building blocks to be successful, but like a successful building, you can't have just one and expect audiences to perceive this building or this successful model. You have to have all of them in place. Here's an example for us to consider using the model of the three-story thesis that you will read about in the assigned chapter. At the very bottom, and I'm using this example of health and fitness, health and wellness, something we all care deeply about and we all have our opinions on. At the very bottom, you have an example of a thesis statement that would never work for a paper because it's just a fact. It's not something that's going to challenge or excite your audience because they already know that. People need to eat right and exercise. We know that it is important. It's not to say that it isn't important, but when we hear things as audiences, as humans that we already feel like we know, we're going to dismiss it. We're kind of going to groan and we're not going to be open to engaging in those kinds of conversations because we already learned that. The second floor is a little bit better, but it's still not enough because just making an argument doesn't necessarily mean you're pushing your audiences forward because they may have had that argument already and they don't want to engage in it again. So something like the best form of exercise is running on a treadmill. People have heard before that running outside, running indoors, running on a treadmill, it's something they need to do. So when you're reminding them again of that through an argument, it's still not enough. The top floor, we have an example of a much improved thesis statement. This one not only has that sense of argument, it has that sense of fact, but it also has, more importantly, this sense of meaning. So exercise gives more energy than it takes. Yoga and jogging are exercises people must incorporate into their daily lives. These exercises renew spirit and energy. How did we get to this top floor? How did we construct this thesis statement? I like to make it as easy as possible for my students. And for the past decade now, I've been giving my students what I call the thesis template. How this thesis statement works foremost is you think of a wise quote that you're going to author yourself. You're going to draw on what you already know about inspirational quotes. Look around your home. you probably have a plaque somewhere with an inspirational quote on it. I can remember an inspirational quote that I memorized in high school by Ralph Waldo Emerson. The reward of a thing well done is having done it. I was drawn to this quote. It had this sense of fact, but also meaning and argument behind it. The only difference between what you're going to remember about a wise quote and the thesis template is you're authoring your own wise quote. Imagine how great that paper is going to be when you build it around your own wise quote. It's going to be a pretty good paper. And that's how the thesis statement template works. So the template is this. You're going to author your own wise quote, a wise quote you author yourself. Don't use quotation marks for this. It's your own statement. A wise quote you author yourself, semicolon. Why a semicolon? Because you're going to have two independent clauses. If you have two independent clauses, two independent statements joined together, it's going to say a little bit more. It's going to have a little more depth. And that's the idea behind using the semicolon and two independent clauses. Wise quote you author yourself, a specific assertion that could be true, one that invites debate. That's that thought experiment. Throw something out there and kind of see if it resonates with yourself and with your readers. First part, wise quote. Second part, this specific assertion that could be true. Here's another example of a great thesis statement, one that follows the template. One should never wait for desperation. People cannot tiptoe into a new life. All right, so we can see the model displayed there for us of the thesis template. Importantly, there are three criteria to keep in mind when writing a thesis statement, when you're planning those thesis statements. Three criteria. Number one is it has to be original. You can't just say something that's already been said. Your message is going to have to be original. Reflect carefully, think about what you've heard, resist those phrases, those lines that you know you've heard. Really push yourself. It needs to be arguable. Somebody needs to be able to push back and say, well, I disagree with that. That means you're engaging your readers in a conversation that you need to support. And the last one is true. You can't just make something up. If you make something up, audiences could roll their eyes and say, well, yeah, I wish that too. Usually wishes are this idea that it's something that's far-fetched and it doesn't quite make for a great thesis statement. So you want to point out something that is true. It's grounded in true. It's just that audiences have forgotten it, or maybe they haven't put into words this idea that you're now putting into words for them. It's another great way to think about the thesis statement. How can you get these thesis statements? I recommend writing a whole list of them before you even jump in and write a paper. For instance, if I know I'm writing about the city of Dickinson, right? I want to write a paper about Dickinson. Well, I wouldn't just use the first thesis statement. I would start my paper by writing a whole bunch of possible thesis statements. And then once I get to one that I look at it and I think, wow, I love that one. That's the one you use. And then you build your paper around it. I challenge you this semester to write about 15 of them before you get in there and write any of the papers that require thesis statements. Write 15 possible thesis statements before you commit to the paper. And yeah, there is something to be said about just getting in there and starting writing. Usually, if you do that, it's a little bit more unorganized because you don't know what your message is yet. And your readers are going to find that same kind of aggravation while they're reading the paper. So absolutely, list many possible thesis statements and then pick the best one for your paper and close your opening paragraphs with your thesis statements. You can always send me a message. I'm always available to help and guide my students. I love looking at thesis statements. You can stop by during an office hour. Any of those are possibilities for you this semester as you work on your thesis statements. Another option is the Q&A board. Throw your thesis statement in there and see what your classmates have to say.